Hey, welcome everybody. Get your Bible, turn to Daniel chapter 8. We're going to be getting into some interesting and some deep stuff today in the book of Daniel, chapter 8. I want to read one verse to start us off. Daniel chapter 8, verse 3. Then I lifted up mine eyes, this is Daniel speaking, and saw, and behold, there stood before the river a ram which had two horns. And the two horns were high, but one was higher than the other. And the higher one came up fast. And I saw the ram pushing westward and northward and southward, so that no beast might stand before him. And I'll stop right there. What in the world is going on here? What's with this ram? I mean, with the two horns, and one's higher than the other. What's this all about? Daniel chapter 8 is one of the more difficult chapters in Daniel. Not that we can't understand them all, but it's a little tougher than some of the other chapters. We're going to dig into this right out of my Daniel study guide. I hope you've ordered yours. Hope you've already got one. And if you do, you ought to go get it. If you've already got it, and follow along as we share some insights. Doc is here, and we're gonna dig into this chapter 8. I'm going to show you some things I believe we're going to help you understand the end times a little better, okay? The music's going to come on, and we'll be right back. Hey, everybody, glad to have you with us today. Boy, these are exciting days. It's a different country, isn't it? Things have changed in America. I mean, you look at just the first 2 weeks of President Trump's administration. There's a list as long as your arm, as long as your leg, I think.
I think he's done more positive things in 2 weeks than the last guy did in 4 years.
Yeah. It's unbelievable.
Well, I don't know if he's done too many of any positive things in the past.
Yeah. It's amazing what's happening. And we did a little clip for the radio that you folks on TV won't see, but it is on YouTube. You can go and watch it. We did a show, I don't know what we called it, Doc, but we discussed the 10 kings, the 10 kingdoms, the 10 horns, the 10 toes, and the fact that it appears in the end time that there's going to be not just the Antichrist, but there's going to be 10 regions or 10 kingdoms or 10 financial institutions, something, and that they're going to help him rule for a while, but he'll be over them. And
I can see that formulating not only in the Greenland, Canada, Mexico situation, but globally, you can see the different groups that are pulling together.
I thought of it the first time he said that maybe Canada needs to become the 51st state. My wheels started turning right away.
Yeah.
See, we think only the bad guys in the Antichrist can bring in this system. That's not true.
No.
It's very possible that the good guys are also going to bring the world together.
And they don't. Folks, you know this well as I do, but the greater majority, if not all of the major politicians in the world, have no idea of prophecy, and what they have is a skewed idea.
Yeah. And I think Donald Trump loves America.
Oh, I'm confident.
I think he is a patriot. I think he wants to help people.
But in his position and with all of that, it is affecting and everybody knows it is affecting the entire world.
Yeah.
And what they don't understand is they're setting some of the final pieces for that Antichrist kingdom.
And I say, even so, come quickly.
Right. Lord Jesus, amen.
All right, so Daniel, we finished with Daniel 7 last week, but I want to go back and touch on just a couple things, and then we're coming right to Daniel chapter 8. Just give us 2 or 3 minutes here. I was looking through my study guide here, and Daniel 7 is kind of long. It's one of the longer chapters in my study guide. And so I saw a few things that I wish that I had said something about. Let me just read you a couple of quotes that are in the book that I wrote here. The Antichrist is the head of the political entity of Babylon. The false prophet is the head of the religious entity of Babylon. I hope people understand that there's one Babylon, but that Babylon is made up of really 3 entities, the economic, the political, and the religious.
17 and 18 chapters of Revelation.
And the Antichrist heads up that political entity, a different beast, a different man. He's called a beast in Revelation 13. Now, these are human beings, by the way, folks. These are not angels.
Right.
These are not somebody that came back from the dead. Nobody comes back from the dead. These are human beings. Somebody's going to be the head of the religious leader, of the religious order.
Yeah.
Another's going to be the political leader.
Yeah.
And
exactly right.
And so the two beasts, by the way, I said this, two beasts never get along. You got to watch them. You put two beasts in a cage, one of them is going to fight for supremacy.
There's always got to be an alpha.
That's right. And by the way, that happens in the middle of the tribulation.
Yep.
Get my book, the Henry VIII, the 500-year-old prophecy of Henry VIII, little pamphlet. I share a prophecy. It's not really a prophecy, but it's something that happened in history that's going to repeat in the middle of the tribulation. And it's the Antichrist throwing the false prophet under the bus and going on without him. And so listen to this statement I made here, because I talk about the Roman Catholic Church beginning with Constantine way back in the 313 AD. And his idea was to merge the church with the state. I mean, I understand from a human perspective that sounded good, but it don't work. And I made this statement here: to merge a church with a wild beast creates a monster.
Yep.
And that's what we have.
That's exactly
the Roman
right.
Catholic system. The Spanish Inquisition, millions were put to death, tortured to death.
And they don't want anybody to know about that part of history.
Yeah. And the Catholic Church helped Hitler rise to power in the 1930s,
right?
Which was made public a few years ago under, I think Obama was president. The Pope apologized for it. So these are things that have been admitted to in recent years. Revelation 18, I wrote, has all the characteristics of America. I'm not saying it is America. I'm saying it could be. And the character traits are there, which are interesting, which only means that America is the head of the European system. That's all.
At the moment.
Yeah, at the moment. That could change.
Anything could change quickly in our world.
So with that said, we'll move on to chapter 8. So I just wanted to touch base on a couple of things that we didn't hit on last week. Now, chapter 8, here's the theme for chapter 8. And by the way, these are my opinions. And this is what I chose for the theme of the chapter. And it's this: the ram, the goat, and the Antichrist. Yeah. Does that sound like the theme to you?
Well, that's the major players that are brought out in this portion of Scripture.
Yeah, and of course, the Antichrist isn't in it. He's shadowed in it.
Yep.
And the ram, the goat.
And there's actions of that shadow that will be the fulfillment, yet future.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll get to that.
First paragraph in the study guide here. Daniel 8 can be confusing. That's important. It can be.
If you don't understand, here's the key, Dan. If you don't understand that some prophecies are dual in their nature, when you understand that, this then begins to come a little easier to understand.
There's a man we're going to look at who hasn't come yet. He's looking forward, but that man represents somebody forward of him called the Antichrist.
All of them were forward of Daniel at that moment.
There was something that was coming at the end of the Persian Empire. So Daniel 8 can be a little confusing, as it sounds like the same history lesson that we got in chapter 2 and chapter 7, the four kingdoms of the world: Babylon, Persia, Media Persia, Greece, and Rome. We see some of them same empires here, but it is speaking of the fall of the Persian Empire, which is empire number 2, the Medes and the Persians, and the rise of the empire of Greece under Alexander the Great. So the two middle kingdoms, Persia and Greece. Daniel chapter 8 is talking about the end of that second empire under Persia and the beginnings of Alexander the Great.
Right. And even giving you the information of his demise and the end. Yeah.
All right. And so it is, in fact, speaking about the kingdoms of Daniel 2 and Daniel 7, but specifically the end of the Persian Empire and some important prophetic details dealing with the kingdom of Greece. he's not only given us some history lesson, and to Daniel, it was a prophecy lesson.
Yes.
It hadn't happened yet. For us, some of it's happened, but not all of it. The first part has happened, but the first part has a dual prophecy, looking forward to the Antichrist kingdom.
Well, the verse that you started with, of course, is a picture of the Medes and the Persians, because it had two horns, and the one horn was greater than the other.
Yeah.
That's kind of goes back to the last chapter. The bear had one taller shoulder than the other, because the Persians were stronger than the Medes.
Sure. Yeah.
And so that's who that individual is talking
So
about.
that brings us to our little outline here. I explained the ram and the goat and the horns, and here's what I got. The ram is the kingdom of Persia. You could say Media Persia, but at this time it's Persia.
Yeah.
Media is they're kind of in the background now, and there's one leader left. The two horns on the head of the ram are the two leaders that the Bible talks about: Darius and Cyrus, King Cyrus. Darius, I believe, is at the beginning, and I think they kind of rule together somewhat at the beginning.
They work together because if you do a little background study of all of this, you realize that the Medes and the gods that they served played into all, a religious aspect played into all of this that brought them together to defeat the Babylonians, who had kind of pushed the Medes' God to the side. And so they were able to use that as a tool to bring them together.
Okay, so the two horns, and one's bigger than the other.
Yeah, the
symbolizing
Persians.
one guy's more powerful.
Yes.
That, of course, that's
The Persians
that's
were-
Cyrus.
That's why it's always referred to as the Persian Empire.
Yeah.
But it started out as the Medo-Persians.
Not that Darius wasn't a great man.
No.
There's some great stuff. The
But he was
Lion's
evidently
Den,
a great soldier.
the Lion's Den in the Daniel Study Guide is precious.
Yeah.
It's precious. The love that Darius had for Daniel, it's just amazing. He was so brokenhearted when he had to put him in the Lion's Den, and he don't sleep all night, and he runs. The next morning, runs to the hole, moves the rock off. Oh, Daniel, does thy God liveth? And it's
okay,
precious.
Doc. It's okay.
Yeah. Hey, come on down, have some coffee with me. And all right, so
Might not have been that great, but
the goat. And by the way, what happens next is sad, very sad. Where the people who tricked the king into making that decree that if anybody prayed to another
they
god,
became breakfast and dinner for the
they
lions.
were thrown in with their wives and their children alive into the pit, and their bones were broken down in the bottom there. That makes me think a little bit about what's going on today. You know, you do wrong and you try to destroy people. Yeah. And the next administration comes on the scene. Guess what? The light's turned on. Yeah. All of a sudden, you're in the spotlight, and judgment.
It also shows you the wisdom of knowing and understanding humanity, that a people group that is indoctrinated from the time they're born all the way through, and they're nothing but indoctrination, the only way to change that is to eliminate it.
Yeah.
This is one of the reasons why no Arab nation, no matter what flavor, will take the Palestinians. Yeah,
that's right. And it was just offered again. They wanted to send them, and I forget which country it was. They said, nope. All right, so the goat. So we got the ram, Persia, the two horns on its head. Of course, God uses animals to illustrate these things. And by the way, what does a ram do? He just butts heads with everything in front of him.
What it goes on to say. He stomps in every direction.
It don't matter how big you are. You get in the way of I've seen videos of the guys on mini motorbikes in third world nations. Them goats will knock them over. It's funny to watch. Yeah. They don't matter how big. They'll take on a bull or cow. Yeah. And so God is saying that Persia is like a ram. Don't mess with him. Don't get in his way, because he's coming through and he's going to butt you in the head.
And then he raises up Greece.
And that is the goat.
That's the goat. And he don't need but one big horn.
Yeah.
And he not only kills or eliminates, but he stomps it.
Now,
out.
a goat doesn't have one horn, obviously, so God is improvising. He's illustrating
Horns
something.
are always prophetically symbolizing power and authority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that horn represents a man called Alexander
Alexander the Great.
That everybody watching our show today has heard of
yes.
Alexander the Great. There's movies about,
No,
books about him.
nobody, basically, as far as I know, in all of history, in as short a period of time, accomplished what he accomplished militarily. Nobody.
Yeah. Someone said by the age of 29 or 27, as a young man, he ruled the world.
Yeah.
The world as they knew it.
He might have been 30, somewhere along in there, but it's amazing. He was a tremendous soldier.
So Alexander the Great, when I was in Israel, my wife and I, in 2017, one of the places we went was Megiddo. And we're standing there looking down at the valley where Armageddon is going to take place. And that's the same place, and maybe we were standing on the same spot, I don't know, where Alexander the Great once stood and made the statement, this is the greatest battlefield in the world. Now, I don't know if Alexander the Great, I don't believe he knew about the Battle of Armageddon because the New Testament hadn't been given yet. He saw that property, and to him, as a mastermind of battle that he had, he got it from his father.
And it's amazing, he did all of this, and how old was he? 36, 7 when he died? He was a young
it might have
guy.
been less than that, but
he was a relatively young guy, and
34. Died at 34.
And so I don't think he had more than maybe an 8 or 10 year period of reign when he did all of this. But it's amazing, Daniel. Of course, in chapter 8, he's having a vision. He's in the palace at Shushan, by the way, which was original Elam, and now it's called the province of Elam, because now the prophecies that you read about in the book of Jeremiah was given about 70 years before this, and so Elam no longer is its own kingdom, but it's a province of the Persian kingdom, and so he's there. And all of a sudden, he's looking out over the river, and it's as real as everything. It's surreal. He faints. I can only imagine what it must have been like that day.
Yeah.
Wow.
So a little background here. By the way, the chapter takes us further into the future of the Grecian Empire. That's Greece. The Bible calls it Grecia. We call it the Grecian Empire, but it's Greece, old Greece. Takes us further into the Grecian Empire, and I wrote here why. To give history, but more importantly, to give us some attributes of the coming man of sin.
That's right.
The guy we call the Antichrist.
And a little bit about the background of how it all comes and ties together.
Because what's going to happen in this chapter is going to happen again in the future.
Yes, because there's going to be something happen we'll talk about in just a moment that is a shadow of really what it's all about, yet future to us.
Yeah. So some background. In 336 BC, remember the clock in the Old Testament's going backwards. It starts at
counting up shorter.
4,000 going down. Okay, it's confusing. So in other words, 336 before the New Testament begins, as they call it. Actually, New Testament don't really begin till the death of Christ, but anyway. Folks know what I mean here. 336 BC, Alexander the Great his father is named Philip. He was assassinated. Nothing new about that. That's been going on for centuries, right? That kind of stuff still going on. It almost happened here with President Trump. Philip, his dad was assassinated. At 20 years of age, Alexander claimed the Macedonian throne. So when he's 20 years old, his father's assassinated. He claims the throne. His son claims the throne, Alexander. I'm sure he had some training from his dad. He knew how to fight. He was expert. By 322 BC, 4 years later, he would become the third ruler as depicted in the statue in Daniel chapter. In other words, he'll become the leader of the world around Israel at that time.
And we need to remember the reason of all of that is because all of these kingdoms are overlords of Israel.
Yeah, the times of the Gentiles.
Yes.
And so he becomes the third. It started with Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon, and of course his grandson.
And through that, but
And
the
then the
Babylonians.
Medes and the Persians, Darius and Cyrus. And now
Alexander the Great.
Alexander the Great, his father was assassinated, but he was not the head of the world yet. Alexander takes over. He kills.
He's the one.
He takes over the Persians.
He's the one that's going to really do
Is that the
something
president
about
calling? Because if that's
I
Mr.
guess
Trump,
so.
I want to talk to him.
No.
And
don't
this has
know.
never happened on our show before. That the doc doesn't turn his phone volume off.
Normally, because they work in my Bluetooth and my hearing aids.
And now I'm making fun of you, and I'm thinking, boy, I hope mine's off, because usually that's what
I usually have it
you
turned
make
off.
fun of somebody, and then it happens to you.
I'm not worried.
So at the age of 20, his father dies. They're still under the kingdom of Persia at that time. 4 years later, I think I get that right, 14 years later, he's going to take over. Alexander the Great's going to go on his military campaign. He'll be the ruler of the world.
And then, because he's not married, evidently, and he doesn't have any children, at least
Not that we know of.
that we know of legally. But anyway, so there was nobody to take his place on the throne.
He's known in history as Alexander the Great. When Alexander died at 34 years of age, his kingdom was divided between his four generals.
The four generals.
And we see this in different passages
And
of the Bible.
historically, you can find all of these and how they battled with each other, whatever, and how the Seleucids rose to the leadership.
At this point, the narrative moves in the future to the year 165 BC. So the story goes forward here. Alexander the Great takes over. Of course, he dies. His four generals are going to take over. They're going to have four regions of the world.
That's the four horns that come out of him here in the text.
One of them is going to be in the lineage of a boy who's going to become important here. Now, let me read him a little paragraph. The timeline in Daniel chapter 8 moves to the future to approximately 165 BC with the rule of a descendant of one of those four generals. I'm not saying he was his son, but a son's son or whatever.
He was in that lineage.
He's in that lineage. Because there's quite a few years there, but we've gone from 322 to 165. So in that lineage of the four generals is a brutal
And this is
tyrant.
the development. You're now into what was called the early days of the Roman Empire.
Yeah. Now, just so people don't get confused, the Roman Empire is not ruling the world yet, but they are there and they are ruling their area.
They are.
But Greece has conquered the world, so but how do you control it all?
But it's been divided up by those four kings. But by the time we get here,
Rome has risen.
The battle between all of them has brought the Seleucid lineage into what will be the strongest, the iron leg.
And the winner of that battle is going to take over the leadership,
That's right.
and that's going to be
the full-blown Roman Empire.
The leg, the iron, and all that. The Roman kingdom. So the rule of the descent of one of these four generals, a brutal tyrant named Antiochus Epiphanes. Epiphanes, if I'm saying that right. That's how I hear people say it.
Right.
Now, folks, listen very carefully. He is the little horn in Daniel chapter 8, verse 8. Let me read that. 8:8. Therefore, the he-goat waxed very great, and when he was strong, the great horn was broken. For it came out four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. Verse 9. Now verse 8 tells us the great horn that's broken, that's Alexander the Great. The four, then the four notable horns, the four notable ones are going to be the four generals.
Yes.
We know that by looking back in history. You wouldn't have known that without it happening, but now that it's happened, we look back and we see that. The four generals took the kingdom. That's how he set it up. The four notable ones toward the four winds of heaven. And out of one of them, four generals, is going to come a little horn, it says. I'm in verse 9 now, chapter 8, verse 9, which waxed exceeding great forward toward the south, toward the east, and toward the pleasant land.
That's Israel.
Yeah, and I have a picture of that in the study guide, and this piece of property that this fourth general had, and that this guy's going to come to, he's going to be in that lineage, includes the promised land,
Right.
Israel. What I want people to realize here, when I say he's the little horn, don't confuse that with the little horn called the Antichrist later on.
But he is a shadow of it.
He is.
Now, the word epiphanies is one he gave to himself, and it literally means God manifested.
Yeah. And
He's declaring himself to be God.
And I wrote here, he is not the Antichrist, who is the little horn of Daniel 7, but is a type or a shadow of him. And you will see this in my commentary later on in this study guide. We probably won't get to it.
Because he's going to...
He's going to do what's going to happen in Matthew 24.
Yes.
The abomination.
But Matthew 24 is talking about something yet future.
Right.
Because when Christ, 200 years after this happens, because this king's going to come in and set up a display of Zeus in the temple and offer pigs on the altar. History says that it was 2,300 days, the Bible said, and by the time of the rise of the Maccabees revolt, and then the removal of those stones and putting new stones in and dedicating, you find that it was exactly 6 years, 3 months, and 18 days.
Where did the time go, Doc?
Well, it's gone.
Yeah. All right, so I don't know. We may want to do a little more on this next week because we didn't get as far as I thought we were going to get. But this man named Antiochus Epiphanes, he dies in 164.
Yep.
He's going to desecrate the temple. He's going to sacrifice pigs in there. And a lot of people get confused with it. This is a shadow of what's going to happen in Matthew 24.
Because there will be a little horn, which is the Antichrist in the future, that will do the same thing, basically the same thing, only it'll be an image of the Antichrist that is set up.
Yeah, it's not going to be pigs this time.
No. It'd just be the elimination of the oblation.
He's going to take the sacrifice away, and he's going to become.
But this is a shadow. In other words, this is a picture of what dual prophecy is.
Yeah.
There was a time historically where there was a fulfillment as a shadow, and yet the full meaning is yet future.
Well, I got a few things highlighted. Tell you what, next week we'll spend 5 or 6 minutes. I'll read a few highlighted things. I'll give some lessons, and then we'll move on to chapter 9 next week. We want to keep this flowing. We can't give it all to you. Get the study guide. If you don't have this yet, get on the phone, call the number, and order this, or get on your website, get on your computer, and go to the website, and you can order it there. Interesting stuff. Anything to say in closing, Doc?
Nope.
All right. He's going to get his phone shut off for the next. That's funny. Anyway, all right. Well, thanks for being with us today. We appreciate every one of you. We're viewer supported. Contact us. We'd love to talk to you. But until next time, keep your eyes on them skies.
Yeah.